Madam President, last month, as my friend from Massachusetts just mentioned, the Supreme Court ruled that the Obama administration's Health and Human Services mandate infringes on the First Amendment guarantee of religious freedom. And this is a guarantee that Americans have enjoyed the entire history of the country. The first freedom in the First Amendment to the Constitution, the first sentence, is freedom of religion. And in a very recent past, the Congress of the United States voted for a bill that protected that freedom of religion unless there was some extraordinary reason not to have freedom of religion in our country. You know, it's important to try to maintain some sense of good humor and being willing to work with people on other things as people come to the floor and just over and over again say things that are not true. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion on this on religious freedom. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion on the president's health care bill. Everybody is not entitled to their own facts. And if we were dealing with the facts as they truly exist right now, this would be a much different debate. In fact, the Washington Post fact checker just a couple of days ago said this about what Senate Democrats are saying in their rhetoric. He said they're just simply wrong. He said the court ruling does not outlaw contraceptives. The court ruling does not allow bosses to prevent women from seeking birth control. The court ruling does not take away a person's religious freedom. In fact, all the court ruling does is say of the many people that are exempted from this law, we're going to find a way to have people's religious rights upheld. In America, you shouldn't be forced to choose between giving up your business for your faith or giving up your faith for your business. The government has no right under the Constitution, under the political heritage of the country, under the things that this country was built to stand for and designed to stand for. The government has no right to ask people to make that choice. And there are plenty of protections in the Religious Restoration Freedom Act that passed just a few years ago that don't allow this to be taken to some unacceptable extreme. Religious freedom has historically been a bipartisan issue. In fact, the law that the court based their decision on was introduced in the House by then Congressman Chuck Schumer, now Senator Schumer, who sits right over there, and late U.S. Senator Ted Kennedy. They were the people that proposed this legislation. President Clinton signed the bill into law. The Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, voted for the bill. The minority leader of the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, was a co-sponsor of the bill. And this was just considered something that was easily done. It was unanimously passed in the House. It got 3 no votes. It was 97-3 in the Senate. And this is in 1993. It's not in 1893. This is a dozen years ago when the understanding was clear that there was a principle in our country that if you're going to violate that principle, you'd better have taken every step possible not to violate the principle of religious freedom. Now, I think our people on the other side would say, well, it was only a handful of years ago when the bill was passed, but we really didn't know that's what it meant. Well, of course they knew that's what it meant, and one of the reasons they knew that's what it meant is it was totally understood at the time that this principle was a principle that the government would adhere to, and in fact, I'm going to submit in my remarks today, without objection, I'm going to add into my remarks a couple of things I will not read. One is the specific language in the Respect for Rights of Conscience Act that I introduced in the 112th Congress, plus the specific language that Senator Kennedy put in the Health Insurance Bill of Rights in 1997 that exempted, that protected religious faith. In fact, it uses the words based on religious or moral convictions of the issuer. The issuer didn't have to do things that they thought were wrong. Senator Moynihan, in the 103rd Congress, when he introduced the Clinton health care package, sometimes called Hillary Care, here's what it said in the bill. Nothing in this title shall be construed to prevent any employer from contributing to the purchase of a standard benefits package which excludes coverage for abortion or other services if the employer objects to such services on the basis of a religious belief or moral conviction. Can't get much clearer than that. The government, according to Senator Schumer, when the Religious Freedom Restoration Act was introduced, said the government shall not substantially burden a person's exercise of religion, even if the burden results in a rule of general applicability, unless it demonstrates that such a burden is in the furtherance of a compelling governmental interest, or two, is the least restrictive means of furthering that governmental interest. This is not a law, the Affordable Health Care Act, that people aren't exempted from. In fact, every woman in America and every man in America that works for an employer who has fewer than 50 people is exempted from this act. There are entire religious faith groups that are exempted from this act if they don't believe in government health care. There are waivers that the president has issued over and over again that exempt people from this act. Many of which were employees of fast food restaurants and other places that had minimal packages, but the president said, well, we're going to exempt them at least for a while. But the people who work for employers of under 50 are exempted forever until the law is changed. And there are millions of more people that work for employers of under 50 than work for employers who will have a faith-based interest, a sincere faith-based interest in just not doing the wrong thing. The majority of people that worship in this country in a given week go to worship in a church where they say that this practice is wrong. It doesn't mean that it's illegal. It doesn't mean that anybody that hears them or appreciates them can't do whatever they want to do, but it does mean that you can go easily to church and be told this is the wrong thing to be part of. The companies involved in the court case have a great tradition of following their faith. Hobby Lobby specifically starts people, if you have when you get a full-time job there, your starting wage is $14 an hour, almost twice the minimum wage. You have to work a couple of hours to have the extra $10 a month that some of these particular medicines and procedures and birth control pills would cost. They close on Sunday. They close earlier at night than their competitors so people can have a family life. In fact, the government conceded that these were companies that clearly were sincere in their belief. So now if you've got millions of people who aren't even covered by the law, why can't you find a way to exempt people from providing a small portion of health coverage that they feel is the wrong thing to do? Now, what did the government say? The government said, well, your choice, you have a way out. You just don't have to provide insurance at all. So if you're an employer of faith and you've wanted to do everything you could to provide the best benefit, probably in excess of the government required benefits in almost all areas that you want to provide, your choice is not to provide insurance at all. And in fact, the suggestion was made that you'd actually save money by not providing insurance at all, because it would only cost $2,000 per employee not to provide insurance at all. That was the penalty in the law. And the government suggested that was probably a lot less than these companies were paying for insurance. Why not just pay the penalty? You don't have to violate your faith. You can just violate your belief that your faith leads you to take a special responsibility for your employees. And you can pay the $2,000 penalty and save money. And while I'm on the $2,000 penalty, Madam President, I would say one of the egregious overreaches of what the government was trying to do here is if you don't provide insurance at all, your penalty is $2,000. If you don't provide exactly the insurance the government says you have to provide, whether you agree with it, faith-driven or otherwise, your penalty is $36,500 per employee. $36,500 per employee if you don't do exactly what the government says. You could provide better insurance in every other area than the government says. You can provide insurance in areas the government didn't even require you to provide insurance in. You could do anything you wanted to do beyond what the government says to do. But if you don't do everything the government says, you'd have to pay $36,500 per employee per year. If you don't provide insurance at all, that was in the regulation. The law that members of the House and Senate voted for, and I wasn't one of them, I was against this law, but the members that the law said you'd have to pay $2,000 if you didn't do anything at all. But the Obama administration said you'd have to pay $36,500 if you didn't do exactly what they said you would have to do. It is the wrong application of religious freedom. The idea that people couldn't have access to any FDA-approved product is just wrong. Somehow that your employee can keep you from having access to anything you want to have access to that's been approved by the FDA is wrong, as the millions of women and men who work for companies who aren't covered under the law prove every day. Prove every day. If you listen to our friends on the other side, you'd think we'd be driven back. We're talking about on behalf of religious freedom, being driven back into the dark ages of December 2013, when everybody that could buy a product in December 2013 can buy that same FDA-approved product today. This is about religious freedom. It's not about money. In fact, in the bill I proposed in the last Congress, I had a provision in that bill that a few Democrats voted for the bill. More Democrats voted for the bill than Republicans voted against it. There was a bipartisan vote for the bill. I had a provision in the bill that offers an amendment that said if the Department of Health and Human Services wants to, they can promulgate a rule that requires an employer to add a benefit of equal value for any benefit that the government requires that they don't want to offer. That's an easy way to say there's no economic motive at all. You know, maybe the government doesn't require mental health coverage. And if you can offer that mental health coverage of equal value to something that your faith leads you to believe you shouldn't be part of, the bill that most Democrats in the Senate voted against had that provision in there. This is not about your pocketbook. This is not about what something cost. This is about whether or not the government's done everything possible to accommodate people's deeply held religious beliefs. The first freedom in the first sentence in the First Amendment to the United States Constitution mattered when it was put in there. It mattered when 16 or so of the current members of the Senate voted for the Religious Freedom Act. It mattered when Ted Kennedy and Senator Moynihan put this exact same ability in the health care laws they proposed less than 20 years ago, and it matters today. And I hope that we move on to solving problems based on the real facts rather than continuing to talk about facts as my friends would like them to be rather than facts as they really are. And I yield back.